Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Always good to be with you here on a Wednesday morning. Trying to stay warm. It's been below freezing for about the last 2 or 3 weeks. It barely has touched 30 here. But I can't complain. I'm inside a house with heat, and I'm talking to you. Doesn't get much better than that.
Huh. Well, I appreciate that. Same here. What's your spiritual energy number?
I'm operating at a 10. I had to choose that this morning because we're navigating some things with circuit breakers in the house and using something in one room on a separate circuit trips the circuit breaker in another room, which is on a different floor, and it's a complete mystery. So I've been trying to figure that out. Um, but again, that's a first world problem, so I'll be fine.
Okay. Well, I'm a 10. I join you in that. Got some challenges this morning as well. But like I said, when I go into my gratitude speech, challenges are what helps you know that you're alive and that you're growing and there's benefit on the other end of that problem. As the gentleman, I'm trying to remember his name now. Um, See at the top. He wrote the book See at the Top.
Yeah, I'm not sure that one.
I'm forgetting his name, but what he said was it had come to me later on. He said that life is like peeling an onion. That if you continue to peel the layers back, there's always a gift. Well, that's why he calls it the present and the problem. You got to take the wrapping off to get to the present. And the wrapping is the challenge that you go through, and then at the core of it is the present. So start with a Z. He got some Z in his name, but it'll come to me. But in any event, I'm just grateful going to my gratitude that I'm alive, I'm healthy, I have my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Grateful for the 24 hours to be here and be on a call with you as well. And for the infinite possibilities day it's going to provide.
Hmm.
What's your gratitude for this morning?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, was it Zig Ziglar?
Zig Ziglar, that was his name.
Okay. The only two Z's that come up were Ziegler and Zuckerberg, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Zuckerberg. So, um, yeah, so Zig Ziglar. So, I'm grateful for my, again, I already mentioned heat. In the middle of the winter, I have a refrigerator with food in it. I have indoor plumbing. All of my basic needs are met, and my frustrations are occasionally when they're interrupted. So again, I count my blessings. For the most part, physically and mentally healthy, as far as I can tell. I get to do work that I care about, not trying to plug myself into somebody else's job description. And I'm grateful for all of that every day, really.
Excellent, excellent. So, with that being said, why don't you walk us into our topic for today?
Yeah. So again, as always, for the last 3 years, and I say this in case anybody is listening to us or watching us for the first time, we've been speaking about the concept of healing America's narratives. That is the title of my 2022 book, and we've been applying it just things that have been going on since 2022. A couple of things have happened in the United States since then. But more specifically today, we're going to zero in on the American narrative, the shadow element, that which we deny about ourselves, that is manifesting currently in the federal government, the Trump administration, the Department of Defense. So Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth leading the way to they've been killing people in the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea using aircraft. They say they're using special forces. I don't know how that translates exactly into aircraft. But they've attacked 22 boats since September 2nd. They've killed in the vicinity of 83 to 87 people. It's not 100% clear. And they've been in off the coast of the southern coast of Mexico, off the western coast of Colombia, off the northern coast of Colombia and the northern coast of Venezuela. And there was one hit just off the southern coast of where Haiti and Dominican Republic, kind of their borders meet. Is all carried out by the U.S. military, allegedly against boats that were smuggling drugs. And there's no evidence of the drugs. I'm not saying there were no drugs on these boats, but the United States government has provided no evidence that, in fact, that's what these boats were doing. There's no evidence that if they were carrying drugs, that their destination was the United States of America. In fact, national and international intelligence has been clear that boats with drugs in the Caribbean are headed to rendezvous with larger vessels out in the Atlantic, taking the drugs to Europe, not the United States. That most of the drugs that enter the U.S. via boat are in the Pacific, through Mexico, as opposed to the Caribbean. So basically, there's no declaration of war. There's no immediate threat to the United States, and we're killing people. And the primary target of the killing has been the alleged drug trade coming out of Venezuela. That's what the Trump administration is speaking about. And they're bringing a major flotilla with aircraft carrier groups, aircraft, over 10,000 infantry, soldiers, Army and Marines into the Caribbean, in a general vicinity of Venezuela. And the question becomes, why are we doing this, specifically targeting Venezuela, under the guise of stopping the drug trade? Because most of what the United States, through Donald Trump, says about fentanyl being the primary drug coming from Venezuela into the United States is that we know that Venezuela isn't the primary supplier of fentanyl to the United States. So Venezuela has, if not the highest, one of the highest concentrations of untapped oil reserves in the world. Venezuela does not have a particularly strong military. Venezuela has the guise of being a democracy, but in fact, the current president, Maduro, lost the last election but stayed in power. He refused to accept the election results. And he's essentially a dictator. Now, back in 2003, a group of American political theorists called the Project for the New American Century were behind the Trump administration's attack on Iraq post 9/11. Iraq had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. This group of people, the Project for the New American Century, they had asked President Clinton in 1998 or 1999 to oust Saddam Hussein. He said that's a primary American foreign policy issue is to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And under the Bush administration, using 9/11 and weapons of mass destruction as excuses, we attacked Iraq for no reason. Unless we were going to get rid of all the dictators on the planet, in which case we would have started with Russia and China, but they're too big and they can fight back. So there's a direct parallel in terms of Iraq. Primary export is oil. If they had been primarily a broccoli exporter, we probably would not have been interested in attacking them. Venezuela is primarily an oil country. That's their primary resource. So whether Donald Trump is being told what to do by people more powerful than him in the oil industry, whether he just doesn't like Maduro, who's a lot like him, who's a dictator who doesn't accept election results unless they're in his favor, or whether Hegseth and Trump just think they're being men by blowing up boats in the water and thinking that that'll distract Americans from how bad the country is doing with regard to affordability, healthcare, and most of the things that our Americans are, middle class Americans are concerned with. Um, the United States under Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are committing violent acts to people in international waters without any direct threat to the country. When you and I have spoken about shadow for the last 3 years, we identify the 9 basic elements of shadow as being ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. And Hegseth and Trump and all the other people in the Trump administration who are leaders tend to embody all of those traits. So it's difficult, even though I've been studying this stuff and working with it for the better part of a decade now, how we're going to heal the narratives of the United States of America if we're going to continue to preemptively kill people using what is still arguably the most powerful military in the world, although China is catching up. And what that means for the rest of us who, for the most part, want to get up in the morning, go to work, take care of our kids if we have them, take care of our parents if we're adults and our parents are aging, and just live relatively decent lives. And we're being led by a group of people that seems to have no respect for the dignity of human beings, whether they're Latinos in this country who look like they might be illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, I should say, whether they're Muslims, or now whether they're alleged Venezuelan drug smugglers. From ICE to the U.S. military under Hegseth, hurting people and even killing them seems to be okay. So that's the thing that needs our attention if we really want to heal the narratives of this country as it approaches its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So that was a lot, I know, but there's a definite parallel between Iraq in 2003 and Venezuela in 2025.
Oh, you finished? I'm sorry.
I can go for another 20 minutes if you want me to. No, I'm good.
Well, I didn't hear your usual. I'm gonna stop, so I was just waiting for that.
Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you for choosing another timely topic. I doing my research and hearing what you were saying. Oil seems to be the common denominator at the very surface level. Obviously, tactics, being, Iraq, they have weapons of mass destruction. In Venezuela, it's drugs being imported in the United States, both deemed as terrorists, both deemed as, immediately need to be dealt with, need to be eradicated, violence. So both administrations practice those type of similarities as well. And I see that, and you point those out. And see, for me, I still think that you began by saying, how can we heal America's narratives while they still do those things? And I kind of go back to say my argument or my perspective for my analysis and my work and learning with you and working with you as well, it all goes back to the system of white supremacy and trying to, if we don't dismantle that system, no matter of changes we do within the system will ever be sustainable, will ever be something that can actually take hold, because they will be co-opted and adopted. Again, just for clarity, I'm not saying white people. I'm saying the system of white supremacy. And being a system engineer, and I point that out only to make this point, I know I said that quite a bit, to be mindful of that, is that I believe in putting frameworks to everything. I don't think it's just a binary white supremacy on, white supremacy off. I think it's different degrees. I came up with 8 degrees for my research. There may be more, but I found 8 for me that I found that makes sense. I'm not going to go through all 8 levels, but at the very tip of the iceberg, the highest level of it is a supremacist. and that's the one that believes that identity is truly white and white is superior and everything else is inferior. And when we see America, and you talked about Donald Trump and the Peacock South exhibiting the shadow elements, definitely of, you're looking at the fear they put out there to their listening base who believe in them, is they're always going to paint fear like we got to do this right now because of this looming threat to us. So we got to act first. But then it's also the bullying aspect of it. It's the aspect of doing it to countries who won't do, who they know that we can beat easily and won't do anything back.
Right.
Like, I think as much as we talk about North Korea, I think Kim Jong Un was smart to say, "Listen, I got nuclear weapons." Back when America was looking for countries with nuclear weapons, they stood up and said, "We have them, and we tested them." And we haven't attacked North Korea. We've talked about it. We've had issues with it, but no military action has ever been directed toward North Korea because we realize that comes with consequences,
Right.
and they don't want those consequences with their actions. And so, for me, everything comes back to we have to get to the point where we can agree that dismantling this system is the course that's going to bring about any consistent change. Because, like I said, anything else, once we acknowledge that the racial, as long as we work within the racial construct, we will never see any real form of justice because the system is designed to snap out any form of justice. Like right now, this goes back to when I was back in the 90s and reading Noam Chomsky's, and he was pointing out books on manufacturing consent and how the media is still complicit, and the media was heavily complicit in the Iraq War of trying to support that narrative. And the media is still doing now, supporting the narrative. Now, you have some media analysts who talk about it and say, well, there wasn't any drugs found on the boat, and Donald Trump's administration is not proving that these folks have drugs on the boat. But it gets mentioned, but it's not really just stamped on. We don't have any proof at all. Like with all the satellite technology we have that has infrared sensing and all those things we have with drone cameras, we can at least have some footage at some point to say, here's the drugs here on this boat that we know for a fact because we've traced it from where they loaded the boat up and here it is on the boat, and this is why we're blowing the boat up. At the very least, I can believe that we had the technology to be able to demonstrate that there's drugs on those boats and they were legitimate in saying that. Even still, that wouldn't justify them blowing the boats up out of water. But that still, they would at least have something of merit to point to. And and the reason I mentioned white supremacists and I went with that as my overall take is because they don't have to justify it. That's just kind of when you're stroking your cat and you're not really paying attention, you're just doing something to calm you. That's what they're doing. They're just calming the base. They're stroking people's egos with that, but they don't have to even say that. They can really just say we blew them up out of the water because we can,
Hmm.
because that's what the actions show, right? And what you gonna do about it? And I think maybe in year 4 that might be his attitude. We're slowly getting to the point where he's going to be so emboldened, his administration and him and the Supreme Court has given complete autonomy to do it. Say, well, you're president, there's nothing we can come at you with legally, you know. So what's to stop him? And the people around Trump who want him to enact Project 2025, and even updated it now to the appendix for Project 2026. We can get into that to another show, but that's what Trump is giving them. He's giving them the fact that he will allow them to govern and set policies, and he'll just be the face of the movement as long as he gets his money and he's able to extract the resources and he stays in power. In his mind, he won't go to jail. Then he'll do it, and that's the win-win. That's the trade-off that we see happening in the country. And until people really get to the point where everyone says an injustice against everyone, or injustice, like King said, to quote Martin Luther King Jr., an injustice against anyone is an injustice against everyone. Until we really adopt that kind of mindset and dismantle the system of white supremacy, then we can begin to really heal America's narrative. So that's my long-winded answer for the first take.
Yeah, and a couple of things that you said I want to respond to, and I agree generally. And I can say like part B that I didn't get into because I was my introduction was the thing. One of the primary things that separates countries that attempt to practice democracy, and they all practice it imperfectly, but they try, including the United States. I mean, it's obviously, we're still working toward a more perfect union. The American democracy, as we've spoken about for 3 years now, didn't include women, indigenous peoples, or Africans and African Americans at the outset. And all three of those groups continue to fight for complete equality. The women and the African Americans and generally people of color have done better, even though the Native Americans are people of color as well, than the Native Americans. They are effectively a genocide was committed against them, and their cultures were destroyed. But progressively over time, the country has applied the rule of law to more and more people. Again, never perfectly, but always in an increasingly inclusive, comprehensive way. Where just a horrible example, but I'll use it because it makes the point. What happened to George Floyd and others in the 21st century, black men killed by law enforcement. That was common practice post-Civil War. After slavery ended, after Reconstruction was interrupted by Andrew Johnson, and for the years from 1877 through 1950, I mean, lynchings took place on a regular basis, primarily in the South, and law enforcement was involved in those. So the progress has been made. But what separates those nations, including the United States, who do work toward a liberal democratic order, to use that language, is the rule of law. And this administration is led by a man who, before he ever got anywhere near the elevator in 2015, when he came down and said he was going to run for president, was involved in over 3,500 lawsuits as a businessman, both as a plaintiff and as a defendant. And we're not going to get into the history of that. But coming back to the boats in the Pacific Ocean and in the Caribbean Sea, there's this organization that by definition on its website is known as the Primary Maritime Law Enforcement Agency of the United States of America. And it's appropriately labeled the Coast Guard. It guards the coast from bad people. And occasionally it has worked with the military in some military operations, but it's primarily law enforcement. And it's the agency that intercepts, boards, and seizes illegal contraband on boats and arrests the people bringing the illegal contraband into United States waters. That's what the Coast Guard does. They're not involved in destroying these boats and killing the people on the boats. So these are actually extrajudicial killings. These are killings and bombings, strikes, military strikes that exist outside of the rule of law. And we make claims to be we're the beacon of, we used to be considered the beacon of democracy for the rest of the world. And that was a deserved accolade in certain times in history. Again, never perfect, but we helped out during World War II reluctantly. We didn't want to get involved in World War II. The Japanese convinced us, and then we got involved in Europe as well. But this administration has no respect for the rule of law. And even when a court order comes down that finds against the administration, whether the administration brought the suit or the suit was brought against it, it just basically has said, well, we don't really have to follow what the courts say either. They honor the courts when they get the verdict that agrees with them, and they dishonor it otherwise. So we're actually being ruled by an extrajudicial administration. They don't have respect for the rule of law. And the Justice Department is the federal agency that administers the rule of law on a federal level. So, back to your point, the system of white supremacy that in fact argued for legislating the legality of slavery from the 1700s forward, and even up to the Constitutional Convention, and then post the Constitutional Conventions, has been that system that you're talking about, where the states who felt that they needed to enslave other human beings, and more specifically Africans, in order to run their economies, convinced the states who were getting rid of slavery to compromise with them so they could keep their slaves and stay in the Union. The Civil War finally broke that compromise apart, but then it went back to just another version of white supremacy through Jim Crow, Black Code laws, which had been in existence already, and then the lynchings. So it's the same mindset 250, 200, 150, 100 years later. We can do this to you. And the target of the you keeps shifting. Sometimes it's American citizens, sometimes it's undocumented immigrants, sometimes it's documented immigrants who have brown skin and speak Spanish, and specifically Spanish from Caribbean nations, and Central American nations, and South American nations, not Spanish from Spain, because they're considered white almost for the most part. So it's the same worldview updated for another new century. And to your point, I mean, yeah, the system that gives every member of Congress lifetime health care, high-end health care, while Americans are scraping the bottom of the barrel, realizing that if they lose their job, or if they break their leg, or if they get really sick, they could be bankrupt because of the cost of healthcare and the lack of coverage in this country. The whole system, as you say, does need to be replaced. And that's a tall order, because the people for whom the system works don't want to mess around with it. And they're the ones closest to the seats of power. So that's what we're really looking at now. And rebelling against the United States federal government, and armed rebellion, is pretty much a non-starter nowadays, because it's not these one-shot muskets that you could fight back with anymore. Even the people that have their shotguns and their Glocks, and they've gotten in, they're armed themselves in their own homes for safety, are not going to defeat the U.S. military in a rebellion. So it's going to have to be done in a different way. And that includes the ballot, that includes protests, that includes people seeing what other democracies actually have, and become willing to make the sacrifices necessary to be treated as, equal human beings. And not everybody in this country has that, as we obviously know.
Absolutely. Well, you're absolutely right about that. And I just really wanted to kind of explain a little bit more what I mean when I say the system of white supremacy, so that folks don't think I'm just blaming this again on white people. And that's not what I'm saying.
Don't be blaming me, King.
What I'm saying with that is that when you really, as a system engineer, I look at things as systems, and you really understand the systems and how systems work. And I came up, not that I came up with, again, my analysis, there are basically 15 core systems. There's a little bit more, but it's 15 that really run and govern America and our behaviors. From the justice system to the economic systems, to the education systems, to the finance system. All these are systems. And what I'm saying is that the core of these systems is white supremacy. That it's in the DNA, and this is not a glitch. It's designed that way. It's designed to make sure that systematically the person that stays in power is white identity, and that's what all these systems at its core is going to make sure it happens, and it's practiced at different levels at every system, and we don't have time to go into every system, each system we can at another show. But my point I'm making is once you understand that, then everything the system does is exactly according to system. That's how it's functioning, like Project 2025 and how that functions and how we tolerate that. I mean, Trump was just really the first rich white man that came along and just said that, okay, yes, we have three forms of government. Well, what really happens if I don't want to play by that rule? If I really want to just be king? With the system is designed for that to happen. With anyone else that tried it as non-white man, there's consequences baked into how the U.S. Constitution works. We've seen now how I've heard my entire life how important the Constitution was. And we got to stand for the Constitution. And everything's about making sure, even though you just think logically for a moment, why would you want to still govern yourself by something that was written over 200 years ago by men only and had one demographic do it? And where we're at right now with all the ways that Americans have changed, why would you still hold true to that being the government document without saying, well, let's look at ways to incorporate other people's thoughts and opinions in it? It's kind of like I liken it to a friend of mine who we play Monopoly, and she always wants to be the banker, and then she always has her rules as far as how she wants to set things. And Monopoly is pretty much wide open for it has its specific rules. Most people discount Monopoly's rules and make their own rules to how it works. And so with her being a banker, one thing's for sure, she's never won without any money somehow or another. And then she determines what goes in the free parking and all of those things. And then it gets to the point after a while, if you play 5 or 6 games, that it's a common pattern that you can see. As long as you're playing with her rules, we would never win. And that's what I'm saying here. It's the same thing. As long as we're playing within those rules that were created, no one else will win. And anyone who wants justice won't win. And that's what we got to really begin to look at because, um, again, we can attack and go to war at countries without declaring war. Like when you understand that there's a process for declaring war, and Congress is supposed to do that. Again, as you said before, in 2003, we didn't really declare. Did we declare war with Iraq before
No.
we? No, we didn't declare war with Iraq. We didn't follow the process then. And so each time a person's able to use the system for their own negative benefit, and there's no consequence that really makes sure it doesn't happen again, then it's gonna get worse the next time. See, my biggest concern is not so much getting Trump out of office. And that's what everybody seems to be focused on at the moment. Getting Trump out of office, as though getting him out of office will right the ship, and then we can go on living a harmonious life, as though the folks who created Project 2025 will go away and they won't rise up again. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. What they've learning from this example, like they learned from Bush, that we can have someone better than Trump without all the baggage that Trump brings. He's going to be much more charismatic, much more intelligent. And then he won't be so easy to have people hate him because the fact is he won't be looked at as he will be. There's a scene in this movie or this TV show called um, Fargo series, and there's this scene where a black guy comes to town and he's talking to local sheriffs and he says, they say, well, this is a small town and we like you being here, but we want you to kind of watch your step. And he said, well, the way you all welcome me, you welcome me with, you haven't said anything mean, but your kindness you're giving me makes it seem like you're doing me a favor by being kind. And basically saying your energy is off despite what you're saying. And that's what I'm saying we do here in America. We have glorious things written down as how things should operate, should be governed, but we don't hold true to that. And my point I was going with this is that my whole life I've heard how important the Constitution was, and now I see now that when it comes down again to white supremacy, well, it's not that important if it gets in our way. So we can have these laws, and then Trump can come up with laws to say, well, I'm going to violate that law, like the citizen birthright. Now we want to put that in front of the Supreme Court to say, well, I want to change that. And they're giving them global power. And they haven't ruled on that, but I won't be surprised when they do. I don't know why everybody will be surprised. We talk about like there is still some kind of integrity in the Supreme Court on this decision. And it's like Lucy with the football and Charlie Brown. That's what the Supreme Court is and people's hope. It's like they keep hoping that there's integrity at some point. Okay, this time it's going to be integrity. And then we run up and kick it with all our might. And then the Supreme Court moves the ball and we fall flat on our butts and we get foiled again. And that's what I'm going to see that's going to happen with this decision and other decisions. So that's why I say my summary is until we begin to realize that we all can be better off, because it's not only that the system of white supremacy hurts people who are not non-white rich men. What it also does is it destroys the creativity of every human being of where we really can be, because we all are fighting within this system. So if everybody's fighting to defend it, fighting for my race being better than your race, or I feel a victim because of racism or whatever the case is, then you're taking away energy and mental ability that can be put toward creative things that can benefit humanity for everyone, instead of defending these things for a construct that doesn't even exist at all.
Yeah. I want to zero in on that idea of the Constitution. I'm just there's so many good historians and legal scholars and journalists and folks writing about current events and history and everything nowadays. But I'm about a third of the way through Jill Lepore's "We the People," which is a history of the United States Constitution. So it's and it's going to hold that up for people to see it. And I recommend if there were going to be a book that you had to read if you wanted to become a naturalized American citizen, or if there were going to be like after a certain amount of time, all American citizens were required to read something if they wanted to stay citizens. I'm not recommending that. This is the book. I mean, again, I haven't read everything else that's out there. But in it, she talks about the very thing you said. I was reading yesterday. There was and I forget who said it. I'm not going to go looking for it now. But it was in the it was in the 1880s, and somebody said, and they were arguing about how hard it was to amend the Constitution. Right? And it still is. It's really hard to amend the Constitution, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But somebody said historically, one of the leaders who wanted to go back and make amendments to make sure that everyone born here had a right to vote and had a right to excel and live their lives, because women still couldn't vote in the 1880s. Former enslaved men legally had the right to vote, but they still couldn't vote in the South because of the ballot taxes and black code laws. But the person basically said, and this is paraphrasing, because you said that, the current version of it, said it's ridiculous to govern a country and ideas that were written 90 years ago. So it was, again, they were looking back from just 90 years from the Constitution saying, all right, it was a good start, but we need to bring it up to date. We're now at 250 years after it was written. And there have been thousands, literally thousands, I forget the exact number, of proposed constitutions, proposed amendments to the United States Constitution. And we have 27. And the most recent one was 1992, which had to do with the salaries of Congress people. And the one before that was 1971-72, which gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. And that emerged because we were sending them off to get slaughtered in Vietnam, but they couldn't vote yet. So it's been typically amendments happen right after wars. If you look at the Civil War, the Vietnam War, and there's a few other examples which I can't really bring to mind right now. But if this country is to survive as a functioning democratic republic, the voters are going to have to elect representatives who are willing to amend the Constitution, to get rid of the Electoral College, and to just make a lot of changes. Otherwise, it's not going to last, because a handful of people in a handful of states nowadays determine who gets elected president. The vast majority of votes, not that they don't count, but it comes down to, what is it, 7 swing states they call them now. And that is not a functioning democracy.
Right.
Because the people running for office only speak to and speak in language that addresses the needs of people in those states, and they ignore the other ones. And we have to get rid of the gerrymandering and a lot of other things. But wonderful book, We the People, and its sources. You could spend the rest of your life just going back and reading her sources. It's just a brilliant work of scholarship. And last thing I'll say is she's a brilliant writer. She was actually a writer before she was a historian. So the writing is fun. She makes reading American history and about the Constitution, and she brings to life the people, both those who were in favor of enslavement and wanted to succeed from the nation and led to the Civil War, and those who were against enslavement and were willing to fight a war to end that practice. It's just a wonderful work to read, but it speaks directly to what you and I are talking about, and getting those people elected and then getting them to act, considering the dysfunction of the current Congress. They don't do anything. Mike Johnson's Congress does not do anything other than let the president do what he wants. And the last thing I'll say tied in with that is 2 or 3 days ago, might have been yesterday, Nancy Mace, who's a congresswoman, I think from South Carolina, who I probably disagree with on almost everything. But she's a South Carolina congressman. She wrote an op-ed in the New York Times where she basically criticized her party in Congress because they don't do anything. And she basically said they need to learn a lesson because arguably the best House Speaker in the last century and a half, so in the 21st and 20th century, was Nancy Pelosi, because she knew how to get things done in Congress. And then May said, I disagree with her on almost every policy issue, but she was an effective politician, and we don't have those in the current Republican Congress. So that was from a woman that I just read it, and again, I've seen her say things and do things that I think were horrible. I disagree with it, but she pointed it out, the critique of the current Congress under Mike Johnson, who has just folded their constitutional responsibility to check the presidency and let Trump do what he wants. So, yeah, as Bugs Bunny said to Daffy Duck in their 1990s, talking about the U.S. Constitution, it was intended to be amended. That's the opening. And so I'll stop after this. That's the opening words in this book. I'm going to hold it up so people can see it. Jill Lepore found this.
It was intended to be amended. Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, a ode to the amendments of the U.S. Constitution, 1986.
Okay, it's 1986. So that's how this book began. After the dedication to her family, that's what's in here. So I haven't found that exact source yet, but I mean, come on, Bugs Bunny knows better. Yeah, and Daffy Duck wasn't as smart as Bugs. We all know that, but the rest of us should pretty much be able to figure it out. The Constitution needs to be amended.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying about the system. That, again, just logically thinking, if you move bias completely out of it and just look at a universal way that humans operate. We're growth minded in everything we do. We come up with technology back before our initial way of communicating was Morse code. We built off that. We don't still refer back to Morse code's rules to govern how we communicate nowadays. We've built on that. We've modified it. We amended that technology. That's what technology does. We keep amending. That's what we do with everything else with medicine. Ways we practice medicine back then, we no longer practice because we've learned, we amended, we changed strategies, education system, the way people are learning, we've amended, we've changed. So why would we go back to something that was written? Just remove the racial component completely from it and just look at it from why would you just from a logical standpoint to say, well, to govern how we operate in a society that's the folks who wrote the document would have no way of understanding, can fathom what we can do right now.
Right.
But yet and still, we're going to return back to them for how we should govern things. It only because it reinforces the system. Like we talked about before, you talked about gerrymandering. Well, again, the electoral college and getting away with that. And the idea that some states, every state can send 2 senators, no matter how small it is and how large it is. See, just those things don't really fit the whole everyone's equally represented democracy that we say, but what we have in place does not fit. So there's no integrity there. We're out of alignment there. And until we decide that we really are ready to get in alignment, and we needed someone like Trump to come along and show just how bad the system is. And that's what he's doing. Fortunately, he's showing you that, and at least into our current mindset, this is how the system is going to operate to benefit me and to benefit folks who look like me. And now it's like if you were a CEO and you run a company, you want to get anything done, now's the time to try to get it done during his administration, regardless of how you feel about Trump. Like if I'm Netflix and all I care about is my profit and my shareholders, yes, I would go and kiss the ring at Trump so I can go and buy HBO and control the market share. Why wouldn't I? I mean, it's like, what would stop me if, based on capitalism, which the goal of it is maximum profit, why would I not do that? So that's what we want to continue to see. And that's what people need to recognize and realize. We don't need to be fighting each other over things like worrying about illegal immigration and transgender rights and all these things they throw up as talking points to keep us distracted. We need to be trying to understand how 5 corporations pretty much run everything, and they control the media. Now they're about to control with Netflix controlling, or Netflix or Paramount Plus. I don't know which one I want to get HBO because either one would be worse. But the point of the matter is everything now has been consolidated into the few. And that's what America got away from. America used to be much smaller companies, but they started following the Rockefeller model of vertical integration and then horizontal control. And that's what he does. And they're following that when he brought Standard Oil and all those things. So I just say we got to begin to look at, see what Trump is good at doing is making everybody uncomfortable. That's a good thing about him. It's like other administrations were following that, but we were comfortable with that, and that was not something that we were frogs with the water on simmer, and nobody was feeling it. It just felt a little warm, but then still we were just sitting in the water and we were chilling. Now Trump has turned the temperature up, and the water is beginning to boil. Now everybody's uncomfortable and everybody's saying these things. But again, until someone runs on the ideal of we're gonna get rid of the electoral college, we're gonna make sure that your vote is what represents. You win the majority, you win the popular vote, you win the presidency. Simple as that. We began to me, having a system in place that a political party can appoint a Supreme Court justice that is affiliated with their ideology, that to me doesn't make sense on any level. The judge is supposed to be impartial and unbiased. Yet still, you're going to appoint a judge because they show a conservative bias. But then surprised when they vote on that conservative bias. It's like, what are we doing? We hope that every now and then we get these outliers who's a justice who votes against their conservative bias. Yeah, we get those throughout history, but those are again the outliers. The system works so that If you put a conservative judge there, you put a liberal judge, they supposed to vote based off that party or that particular bias. And so until we begin to really examine how this system is, there's not going to be any change. Now, one thing I will say that I will give Democrats credit over Republicans within this system is this. Your point about Congresswoman Grace is that Republicans cannot govern. They've shown that. They can obstruct. They're great at obstruction, but you give them, they have the complete ability to govern. They can't govern. They cannot create laws because they're not designed to work that way. They're designed to obstruct and make rules and laws that benefit only them. When they got to govern for the whole country and make it appear they care for everybody, they have no policies. They can't even think that way. It's not even in their paradigm to think about how to make things affordable for Americans. That's what Trump's like. There's no word in his mind. There is no word as affordability. It's made up because everything in his life has always been affordable. He's never had to worry about the issue of affordability. How could the audacity for a rich man who's born rich and have all the privilege and money that Trump has, and we listen to him say affordability is not even a real word. Anyone else would be laughed out, kicked out, but he's able to say that and say it repeatedly to the point where it's like, now he's on an American tour now to say that to people. And if you are willing to believe he's telling you that affordability doesn't exist, and that again, immigrants are your problem and trans people are your problem, and having Black holidays and Black people and DEI, those are your issues that you should be concerned with as an American citizen. And I'm going to get rid of those, but I'm not going to do anything for you financially. I'm not going to help improve your benefits. I'm not going to make sure that you have health care. I'm not going to care about any of those things, but I will make sure I get rid of these nagging issues that you have, and you're going to keep, and we keep electing that. That's the problem I have. But we're not spent most of the show on that. We haven't given much on the positive side, so I want to give you the opportunity to shift into the last section of our show in a more positive direction.
Well, go ahead. so I mean, I'm going to say something. I don't think I've ever said this before. I may have spoken around it a bit, but because of the power of social media and its omnipresence, everybody's on their phones scrolling. More and more people, especially younger people, get what they consider news and information from social media. With artificial intelligence growing, which has its, in some ways it has its benefits. I know you use it in good ways. It has its dangers too, because when it's overused in schools, kids don't learn to think or write anymore. And that's a real danger in education for young kids. But really understanding the world in which we live, which was quite a big bite to take. Well, we've been speaking specifically it's actually a very narrow conversation today about the United States Constitution, and some of the general behaviors of the current administration. But we're speaking about the Constitution, and the vast majority of us Americans don't really know what's in it, and don't understand what's in it, and don't see the shortcomings of the writing that's 250 years old. But if you are really concerned with democracy in this country, you have to read books. Right? I mean, you could, on a computer, and God forbid, even on your phone, go and find Frederick Douglass's papers, because there's a digital version of his papers. I'm just using that as an example because I was looking through that yesterday. Because I was in the part of Jill Lepore's book that was speaking about where the word white came from and where it entered into the political language in the United States and when that happened. And she quoted Douglass on certain things and various other people as well, but that stayed in my mind. But there really is no substitute for learning from legitimate historians, journalists, psychologists, spiritual leaders, and you're not going to get it through social media. In fact, on social media, you don't know if what you're reading is from a Russian bot, and they're still there, they're still working, or a Chinese bot, or whatever it is. I'll just give one example to make the point, and I'll stop this. But reading or listening to legitimate lectures, but there's typically less than a lecture because it's shorter than a book. But there's something making the rounds now on social media, and I forget his name, but a player on the Atlanta Falcons spoke at a big fundraising gala in New York City, where many of the billionaires were there, including Mark Zuckerberg and various other billionaires. And he was given this award because of some of the work he's done as a philanthropist. And he didn't talk about what, the award, but he spoke about how important it was for those who were blessed to bless others, whether it's financially or with talent, or whatever it is. It was this beautiful, beautiful piece. And none of the other billionaires even clapped. You kind of looked down and everything. And it was created by some bot somewhere. It wasn't a true story. And people I know who are good people, pretty well-educated people too, because they agreed with the idea of it, kept sharing it. It never happened. And it was based, again, I can't remember the name of the Atlanta Falcons player who allegedly had done this. And he seems to be a really good guy, but he just didn't do this thing that was created by some bot somewhere. He didn't create it himself either. If you're getting your information strictly online, especially historical information, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself. And I use online sources, but I vet them. Whatever, if you do a Google search and you get the AI summary at the top, scroll past that and find the sources that it scraped to get the AI summary, and find something legit that's been around for a while. So that's the positive thing. But otherwise, we have a lot of people walking around with conspiracy theories and wrong information and misunderstandings, and that they say there is no truth is not true. Are there some things where there are various sides to a given fact that can be interpreted in different ways? Absolutely. But there are truths out there. And in this time of our lives, it takes a lot of work to really find it. Find historians, find journalists, find people working in the social services, people working in the world of politics who are trustworthy, and read what they have to say. But if you get a 140 character or 200 character or 500 character social media post, don't put your life on what's behind it. So that's my rant.
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of things you said. I think that, and I know you're not saying this, but I just want to make this point, that I think technology is definitely one of the great equalizers that has come along to help deal with the injustice that's in the world. But again, like a gun, if the owner is not trained properly, then this misuse will be harmful, right? And then people say we need to ban guns. Well, we need to educate people on it, right? And that's what I feel about technology. For example, what sites that I search, use with AI tools. One in particular is Perplexity, one of the best search engines out there for research and information. And the great thing about Perplexity is that it gives you all the sources of where it gets this information from, to your point.
Right.
So now you can get that information summarized, then you can look and see where it got its information to verify it, as you're saying. Right. And what I sum up what you're saying is basically what you're doing is applying critical thinking. And that's where it's lacking. Today's generation, and each generation from today is actually going to continue to get worse. There's no critical thinking because what they've made normalized was taking in small bits of data and programming our minds to get used to just capturing small bits of data consistently instead of having just one focused topic like the U.S. Constitution, which you're reading, what comes in a book format. You got one topic you're focused on, and you're able to just real deep down and drive deeply into that and
Right.
think. Whereas technology, you're going to just see U.S. Constitution, one video on it, and it goes away. Now you got something else over here, and then so now you have no time to really process anything from a deep level because you're consuming so much information. It's like having a buffet of a whole bunch of little small dishes or getting a plate of food. And you're just sitting at the buffet, standing there eating all day, saying, well, I don't know what I want to eat. And you're just staying there as opposed to just getting a plate and sitting down and eating.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%. That's what needs to be done. But we continue to create the culture where, again, because of white supremacy and capitalism, it's not going to be advantageous to go back to where we were. It's advantageous for you to scroll on your phone all day long. And so now the technology is coming out for you to be able to think about when you first wake up, the first thing you would do, and this is where the technology companies, Google, Apple, Samsung, whoever it may be, that's what they want. They want you, the first thing you do when you wake up is log in. Don't do anything else. Log in, get all your information you need, get your calendar, get your biometrics, get your heart, get all that information that they have stored. So they know how everybody is functioning. And you log into the cloud and let everyone know you're up and you're active and what you're doing, and they're monitoring your body. They want that. And they're going to sell it as a benefit. That, well, you do this, and we can monitor your health and you have better outcomes. Your doctor will be able to look at and see if your blood pressure is spiking. You get suggestions on what pharmacy to go to get more medication or what foods to eat. They're marketed that way, but what it in the day, what it be is control, and they have everybody's bio online instantly when you go to bed, when you wake up, when you go to bed. That's the world our children's children are going to be living in and used to, because we've slowly allowed for that to happen with the smartwatches and then the smart rings now that constantly on you, monitoring, connecting with the and giving information. Everything's about data at the end of the day. So I just wanted to make that point as we wrap up. And I know we've gone 2 minutes over, so actually 4 minutes over. I didn't realize that. So we want to shift into the last part of our show where we want to lift up people who we believe have shown the behaviors and characteristics and live the life of being fully human, so we can show that we're not just saying these vague ideas, but there's practical people we can either point to in the past or people who are currently living those behaviors. And again, I'm going to go back to what I feel is who I want to lift up. And I really want to stay on this for a while because something just happened recently. I had a woman I met who was Jewish, that was elderly Jewish lady in her 70s. I met when I was in Colombia, and she and I had been building a relationship, but we had about being fully human. We were in alignment on every single thing about that, as far as quantum physics and how everything works, sharing information, really building slowly, and avoiding the conversation of Israel. Because she had mentioned a few times how important Israel was to her. And we really stayed away from that conversation. So I know if we got into that conversation, that would pretty much stop us. So I felt that let's continue to build first, get our foundation established before we get to that. I knew we were going to have it at some point because she had strong feelings about it. Well, long story short, she sent me a video on it, an Instagram video of a woman in Paris. The woman was an Israeli, either actress or a journalist, and she was attending a pro-Palestine rally. And she had her phone out, and she was trying to talk to different supporters and ask them. But first, she was coming at them with aggression. Why are you here? And do you know about all the stuff that Hamas is doing? And and she's challenging them, like, well, you advocating for this, but you realize how evil Hamas is and Palestinians are killing themselves. And she's trying to make that point. And then her caption, her video says, I'm at a pro-Hamas rally in Paris. And each person she asked, why you here, they all said to free Palestine. That's what they said. Here she's saying pro-Hamas. So this is the video I received from my friend. She asked me, I didn't have to comment on it, but if I did, what were my thoughts? And I sent her very detailed emails. I said, this is not something I can just approach in 2 paragraphs. But I mentioned that and mentioned about being fully human and get away from the construct and not being triggered by our physical or ethnic categories we placed in, but seeing each other as fully human. Can you see the Palestinians as human beings? And that we all need to get away from the construct. So I haven't heard back from her since I sent that email. So hopefully I didn't offend her. But if I did, I'm just being honest and being fully human. And that is what it is. So my point I'm saying now, with all that being said, I want to lift up flowers to the Jewish individuals who still see themselves as human beings and see the Palestinians suffering as human beings and want what Israel is doing stopped and separating the people from the state. And you can't criticize the state without people feeling that you're criticizing the people. And that's the issue, right? And these Jewish people, to me, that standing up for that, stand up for justice, stand up for life, that those are the people I want to continue to lift my flowers up, because to me, they're the ones that history is going to respect and admire, because they're choosing a difficult path when they can easily just fall in line and go with the benefits of what Israel is fighting for them, but they're standing on the side of humanity. And I want to give them flowers for that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so I'm gonna select somebody that I don't think I've ever mentioned him before, but he's actually my oldest friend. I would argue best friend. We grew up together. He's a year and a half younger than I am. 1 year behind me in school, but about a year and a half younger. His name is Paul. Paul Topikian. His parents were Armenian. They served in the army in World War II, both his mother and his father. They're Armenian Americans, but we grew up together. He's just, we're still in touch. Like, we've been friends for 66 years, which is pretty cool. And we have seen each other, just about every year. And years we don't, we talk on the phone and stuff. But he went to a college where you had to work as part of your time there. And you got trained in different jobs. So the students ran the cafeteria. They built new construction. So he was kind of a Renaissance man. He could do carpentry work, electrical work, plumbing work. He learned all that stuff. Got his degree in sociology. Got a master's degree in business, an MBA out of Washington University in St. Louis. First job offer he got was actually with ExxonMobil, which he didn't want to take for environmental reasons, but it was an opportunity for him to learn and apply his business skills. So he did that for a number of years, and he's just really a great learner. So they retooled him. He was a regional sales manager. He was basically worked as an accountant, making sure that things were being done appropriately. He then worked in a job where he was traveling around the world, representing ExxonMobil in certain ways. And he was a middle level guy. He wasn't like a chief executive or anything. And he said he was going to stay for 10 years because they had a really good matching program. If you invested in ExxonMobil stock, they would match you 100%. So he did that, did very well with it. So he retired when he was 50 something. And he and his wife, who's actually began her career as an environmental attorney, which is pretty funny with the ExxonMobil thing. Had one daughter through birth. They adopted an infant from Cambodia, and he's now the chairman of the board for the college he went to. He and his wife take really great care of their 3 grandchildren. And he's just this guy that he did so many different things. He made the decision to work for a big company with whom he disagreed on various levels. But he did that for a while so he could take care of his family. He got out and never looked back. He got out and he grew his hair back now, so he's back to having a ponytail, 70 years old. Because we both had long hair when we were young, but he's just a good guy. And he's been my best friend for years. And we both have other friends who are local to our lives. He actually lives down in Houston, Texas. But just one of the best people I know. And so that's my buddy Paul.
Well, tips off to your buddy Paul. As we wrap up our show, we had a shout out from Benning, Georgia. So good morning from Benning, Georgia. So we appreciate that. Good morning. And as we wrap up our show, again, this has been the Healing America's Narratives podcast. We hope you got some benefit from our conversation because, again, our purpose with our show is to really talk about some of the current atrocities America is doing and relate them to what they've been done historically based on Reggie's book. And then as we understand the importance of history, begin to work our way to understanding how that impacts where we are today in our behaviors and why it's important for us to begin to start seeing each other and operate. First, see ourselves as human beings, and then we begin to see each other as human beings. And that's really what the goal of our show is. So hopefully you got some value from that, or you're getting some value. Our show is each Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until next Wednesday, we want everyone to continue to work towards becoming more fully human. Thank you.